Hi, and welcome to PHQ, Questions from the Personality Hacker Community. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And let's get right to our question this week.
Hi, Joel and Antonia. I just had a question about types. I'm pretty sure I'm an INFP, but I always test as an INFJ or an ISFJ. I hardly ever have tested as an INFP. I even took the official test and I came out an INFJ. And I think the reason for this is because I'm not very spontaneous or impulsive, and I usually like plans and I stick to a routine for the most part. I'm also really bad at improvising. I even had to write my question down so I wouldn't clam up when I recorded this. So despite all that, I really doubt I'm an INFJ. But I would just love to know if you've ever observed this with INFPs. I've also wondered if other INFPs can relate to this, because it really confuses me. It makes me wonder if I'm really an INFP, or maybe if I'm a different type altogether. So at this point, I'm open to pretty much anything, and I would love to know your thoughts on this. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Andrea, for the question.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm kind of glad this came up, honestly. This is something that is a phenomena that is not uncommon to people who lead with the cognitive function introverted feeling, or what we call authenticity. So I would say that the people who have the greatest challenge in typing themselves, especially when they're relying on, say, online assessments or quizzes or tests, are ISFPs and INFPs. It's not uncommon for an INFP to test out as a different type or not want to feel boxed in when they do. when they test out as a type and they read their description, ISFPs and INFPs have some of the hardest time feeling boxed in because the introverted feeling process itself sees so much texture within their individuality. Introverted feeling goes in and experiences all of the different characters within you. In fact, when I'm trying to explain the cognitive function of introverted feeling in like our profiler training course or other courses that we teach, one of the things I try to do is compare and contrast it with, say, extroverted feeling, the other cognitive function that FJs in the Myers-Briggs system use. And if you think of extroverted feeling, or what we call harmony, as managing a bunch of people in a room and trying to take all of those different voices into consideration when you're trying to get a need met. Let's say everybody wants to go see a movie, or they're trying to figure out what to do that night as a group. And you've got all these different voices to manage. You've got all these different people with different agendas and desires and wants. And a person who uses extroverted feeling is trying to manage all of this to get, everybody cohesively together, to, herd the cats and then end up doing something where everybody feels good about it. Now let's take all of those people in a room and shove them inside a single individual. Because inside we also have a lot of different agendas going on. We have a whole cacophony of different agendas and personalities even within us. So when you use introverted feeling, you get really intimate with all those different voices inside of you. You get intimate with the part of you that is dark. You get intimate with the part of you that is altruistic, the part of you that wants what it wants no matter what, and the part of you that thinks about everybody else and takes them into consideration first. Like, there's a lot of different things going on inside an individual. And when you are taking a test and it gives you a forced choice, do you like organization or do you like to be messy? There's a part of you that says organization and there's a part of you that says messy. So which one do you go with? So people who lead with the process of introverted feeling traditionally have this phenomenon come up for them. It is very difficult for them to settle on just one answer when they can think of all these different exceptions to the rule.
The other piece about this too is if you are an INFP, if you really feel strongly about that, you're testing out as an INFJ and ISFJ. You, as an INFP, remember that 10-year-old process, that technically called tertiary process, is introverted sensing. It's shortened, SI, and we nicknamed it memory. That is the dominant process of an ISFJ. So an ISFJ is a sensor and also a judger. So you might have some judger tendencies typing out based on that tertiary, and some sensor things coming from that tertiary. That tertiary process for a lot of us, it doesn't matter really what personality type you are, that's usually a place where it can really mess up the results on a test or an assessment or how we see ourselves as our personality. It's so impactful to our personality, and yet it's like the development level of a 10-year-old child, but it still impacts us so much. So I think if you're having some confusion around that, if you're typing out those two types, I think that could be coming from that tertiary process is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, especially if you're very identified with it. I mean, you mentioned one of the reasons why you type out as a judger is because in the questions, you know, most assessments have a question about whether or not you're spontaneous or like to plan. The spontaneous component of your personality as an INFP would be in your auxiliary or co-pilot process of extroverted intuition, or what we call exploration. Now, to go to our co-pilot process or develop that co-pilot is work for us. And if we don't have a context that really encourages us to go to that place, and frequently intuitives don't, most of the time we are encouraged to go to a more sensory, a more quote unquote responsible, a more judger-like place. And I think this is one of the big struggles with INPs, is that when they're trying to go to extroverted intuition as a growth phase for them, the world will frequently give them feedback that that's not okay or it's not acceptable. So it makes sense that a lot of INPs would go to their tertiary process of introverted sensing or memory, because that's what's going to be rewarded. Unfortunately, it means that the part of them that has that joie de vivre, the part of them that has that spontaneity, the most creative part of them is then marginalized and they don't feel permission to go to it. So if you're an INFP that is regularly testing out as an INFJ or an ISFJ, it may be that you are visiting your tertiary or 10-year-old process too much. The growth position for an INFP is to get more and more into that spontaneous place, to get out of your comfort zone, to get into a place of that almost feels dangerous to you. That's the growth, the highest growth opportunities in front of you. Now, as far as wanting things to not be messy, having lots of rituals also can be for you in an introverted sensing or memory space as well. One of the things I've noticed about INFPs is that they can integrate that broken window principle in their outside world pretty hardcore. They can really identify with that. And the broken window principle says that in a neighborhood that has a single broken window, you will see a trajectory of that neighborhood getting messier and messier, that more and more things will get broken. Because if there's simply one broken window allowed in the neighborhood, then that sets a tone for the rest of the neighborhood. So in the broken window theory, as soon as a window breaks, you immediately take care of it because that lifts the standard for the entire neighborhood higher and says, we don't tolerate this. I've noticed a lot of INFPs, in order to just keep their lives at an equilibrium, will make sure that not one thing is out of place. Because if one thing is out of place, then that means that they're entering a standard that is a very slippery slope for them. If one thing is out of place, then that gives them permission to have everything out of place. And so their introverted feeling, driver process, that authenticity driver process will create a conviction around cleanliness. It doesn't happen all the time. There are other components that influence whether or not you're going to be an INFP that shows up this way, but that's definitely a possibility. And if that's the case, you will consistently test as a judger, because all of the forced choice questions that has you identifying your behavior, not the etymology of your behavior, but simply how your behavior is showing up, will be judger-like. So one of the most important components of finding your best fit type is recognizing that online assessments are not asking you about why you're doing things. They're asking you what you're doing. And what you're doing can come from multiple different etymological places. So your best fit type is going to transcend tests. If you read the cognitive function stack or the CAR model for an INFP and it's all resonating, if that feels really good to you, if it feels like you've been understood on a level you've never been understood before, if it's a glove that fits, then don't worry about how you're coming out on assessments. That's your best fit type. That's your true type based on a resonance with the wiring, the mental wiring, not so much the behaviors that have a trend to, or like the different cognitive functions trend towards different manifestations, but those are trends. They're not rules. So don't go with the trends of behavior. Go with the function stack that feels the most like you.
Thanks for the question. If you have a question for us here on the PHQ show, questions from the Personality Hacker community, you can ask that over at personalityhacker.com/questions. Our preference is you record a question and have the audio like you heard on this podcast, but you can also write your question in on that page as well, and we can read it on the air and answer it then. Also, I invite you to join our community of like minds, people just like you. It's growing every day. It's over at facebook.com/personalityhacker or twitter.com/personalityhack. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And you've been listening to PHQ, questions from the personality hacker community. We'll talk with you on the next episode.